We'll begin episode 5 in just a minute, but first of all, let's go back to part 4. Thanks to Lino, who borrowed the Sky Cutter from Sly, the leader of the mutants, back in part 3, well, good news, he made it to the Fire Rock Mountain. And now he just let his friends know from his sword where he is. Well, back with Snarf, since back in part 4, he unexpectedly made his escape from the Rat Store, thanks to the Tuskas who attacked it, and he was found by Termagard, their leader. Anyway, Snarf and Termagard had decided to foil the Berserkers' plans from recapturing the Thundarians by hijacking their ship. Anyway, when Snarf arrived on the ship, well, good news for him, he found Rubber Bert and Rubber Bob. Well, thanks to the burbles that Snarf had found, they made their escape. But when the Berserkers found out that their ship had been towed away, they had to get it back. Anyway, back with Lino, who's on Far Rock Mountain, he's face to face with Hachiman. And now Lionel was about to be attacked by Hachiman when he was about to fall off the cliff. Will he be saved? Well, that's where the conclusion begins. So, as I was saying, back with Hachiman, who since back in part 4 had just appeared moments ago, was about to do a favor for Mumm-ra, but instead, at the last minute, he has saved Lionel's life just like what Lionel did with Hachiman back in part 4. Hold on, Lionel, Hachiman said. And then he says, quick, get a hold of the edge of the bridge. But Lionel told him that he can't and that his strength is slipping away. So Hachiman says, let me help you with that. And so he pulled up Lionel, and luckily he did so without a second thought. So good news, Hachiman pulls up Lionel. And good thing he did. So Hachiman goes first to plead his case to say how scared Lionel is. But Lionel just kind of dismisses it and then just lets slip to Hachiman that there are fire rocks everywhere. Also, he says that not only Thundaranium is very well known, but it's the Thundercats' weakness. Well, Hachiman wanted to know from Lionel, despite the risk, he came to the bridge to rescue him and wanted to know if that was true. Lionel not only said it is true, he did it because it was necessary and that he and Hachiman are friends. Then it is true, Hachiman said, and he should have realized right then that what Mumm-ra said was a lie, and it was all part of the plan. So now that Hachiman knew the truth, he told Lionel that his own samurai ancestor will never demand this kind of revenge to destroy a friendship. He also said that he was ashamed for what has happened, that he should have listened to his own instincts, and now he wished he had. Then Hachiman also says that he's been such a fool of not obeying his own code of Bushido because he says that, just like Lionel, he has a code of his own that can't be denied. But Lionel, being supportive as he is, just told Hachiman that there was no way he could have known anything about it. Then Lionel says that Mumm-ra may be the bad guy, but his evil itself is pretty much limitless. Then Hachiman says that he was ashamed for what he had done. So he says, here, let me help you. So long story short, Hachiman allows Lionel to have his arm around his shoulder, and they both went across the bridge. Now that Lionel has made it back to where he started to when he landed the Sky Cutter, so he said to Hachiman, thanks. I think I'm okay now. Then Hachiman wants to know from Lionel, if this is such a bad place, then why did he even bother coming anyway? Well, Lionel explains that since back in part 3, the mutants had the Thundarians prisoners there. So, Lionel explains further that that's why he is there in the first place, to set the Thundarians free. So let me get this straight, Hachiman says. These prisoners are friends of yours? So Lionel nodded his head and told Hachiman that they are. So Hachiman, after he learned this from Lionel, he suggested to go on ahead since Thundraium has never harmed him in any way. But Lionel refused and says that there is no way he's going by himself. But Hachiman assured him that as long as he has his sword, the Thunder Cutter, he's never by himself. And so both of them agreed to the exchange. Meanwhile, back at the Black Pyramid's tomb chamber, after Mumm-ra saw what had happened in the cauldron, he got upset. he realized that his plan to convince Hachiman had backfired. Well, Mumm-ra just pleaded himself a case that even if it was the case, but the Thundercats still don't have a chance of making it out. So he decided there's only one thing left to do: contact Captain Shiner. Because remember, back in part 3, Captain Shiner's the one that transported the Thundarians. So after Captain Shiner was contacted, "What is it now?" Captain Shiner asked. So Mumm-ra says, "I think we got a problem. The rest of the Thundercats are on their way to Fire Rock Mountain right now. Get rid of them," he said. Then Captain Shiner has his turn to plead his case to say that he's getting tired of the game already and that the price itself will be higher than that. So Mumm-ra finally agrees with him and says, "Just name your price, and it's all yours." "Then so be it," Captain Shiner said, and then he told all of his crew members of the Virtus, that's the name of Captain Shiner's ship, to activate all the space scanners immediately, and so the crew did. So long story short, back with the Hovercat and the Thunderclaw, they were on their way to Fire Rock Mountain. But before long, that's when Tiger and Chitara spotted the Virtus that's also heading towards the same location as the Thundercats are. Meanwhile, inside the ship's bridge, the pilot of Captain Shiner's just told him there's a couple of Thundercat vehicles nearby. So Captain Shiner had ordered the pilot to attack them at once, and so he did. So long story short, back with the Thunderclaw and the Hovercat, they seen Captain Shiner's ship up ahead. And of course, Captain Shiner's ship had seen the two vehicles too. But what Tiger and Chitara didn't know is that they were about to be attacked. But luckily, the Thunderclaw and the Hovercat had dodged the Captain Shiner's ship's attack. So back with the Hovercat and the Thunderclaw, they're now underneath the Virtuous. And what Chitara saw was an airlock that goes inside of the ship. So Chitara made a suggestion. So with the Thunderclaw's help, she can get herself inside of the ship itself. Tiger agrees, and so she heads off while he goes to find another way in. So long story short, now that the Thunderclaw had done his job back on the ship's bridge, the pilot just gave Captain Shiner the bad news that the Thunder vehicles are nowhere to be found. "Proceed with the search," Captain Shiner says. "There's no way that the Thundercats can escape the space scanners." So long story short, back with the Hovercat, it made it to the roof of the ship. So, speaking of Tigra, he found his way in. From the roof, of course. So back with Chitara, who had just moments ago made it inside, she's now in the ship's prison. But by the time she was walking by, she was spotted by one of Shiner's guards. Well, luckily for her, she managed to take care of that. But then, just when Chitara was about to be captured by the second guard, luckily for Tigra, he came to her rescue when he did. And let's just say he took care of the second guard too. So anyway, long story short, now that both of Shiner's guards were chained up thanks to Chitara and Tigra, well, before the Thundercats can get to the ship's bridge, one of Shiner's guards just pleaded his case to tell them that there's no way they're getting out of there alive. Well, Tiger has his turn to plead his case to one of Shiner's guards. If they got in one way, then they can get out. And both of the Thundercats had decided to gag the guards, and so they left the ship's prison. Meanwhile, on the ship's bridge, the pilot of the ship just told Captain Shiner this case that they must be miles away by now, and of course, Captain Shiner agrees with him. So just when Captain Shiner told the pilot of the ship that they could relax, that's when, out of nowhere, a voice just says, "Think again, pal. It's Tigra of the Thundercats," and he had just appeared on the ship's bridge. But Tigra's not alone because also on the ship's bridge is Chitara. So now that Captain Shiner and the crew members are all tied up thanks to the Thundercats, I'm not sure what Tiger was doing, but I'm guessing he wants to make the ship's controls to cause the ship to go straight up. Well, Captain Shiner, when he saw what Tiger was doing, he panicked. So now that Captain Shiner had pleaded his case with a panic, that's when Tiger says, "Well, that's the idea. It's too bad we can't stay." Well, now that Chitara had finished setting up the ship's coordinates, so now it's up to the Thundercats to get out. So they got 10 seconds to do that. Then, with only 7 seconds left, both of the Thundercats had left the ship's bridge. With 6 seconds left, Chitara had boarded aboard the Thunderclaw, which is parked from below. Then, back with Tigra, with only 4 seconds left, he boarded the hovercat that's parked on the roof. Then finally, with only 2 seconds left, the good news for two Thundercats, they evacuated just in time for Captain Shiner's ship to disappear when 2 seconds were up. So Chitara goes first to speak in her case to say that Captain Shiner won't be bothering them anymore. Well, even though Tiger agrees with her, but they're running out of time. But now they have to hurry to Fire Rock Mountain, and so off they went. So anyway, back with the Berserkers, remember back in part 4, thanks to Termagor and with a little help from Snarf, their ship was towed away. So now it's up to them to get it back. So they're trying to catch up to it. So speaking of Termagor and Snarf back with them, Snarf panicked and told Termagor the bad news. Now the Berserkers are catching up to get their ship back. Well, Termagor, the leader of the Tuskas, apologized, and the reason being is because he said that the goblin did as much as it could do. Oh, the poor thing, Snarf says. We've been masking too much of it already. And now Snarf said to Termagor, the leader of the Tuskas, that there's a bigger problem. The Berserkers are on their way to Fire Rock Mountain right now. Although Termagor, being supportive as he is, he told Snarf, "Don't worry, I'm sure the Goblin and I will find a way to stop them somehow," he suggested. So long story short, while that's going on, remember the Thunderkins who had just left the cat's lair since part 4, they saw the Goblin along with Termagor and Snarf from up above. So Wily Cat, although suggested to his sister something must be done about it, because he said that both Termagor, his goblin, and Snarf are going to attack the Berserker ship. So Wily Kid, who agrees with her brother, and suggested that they should need some help. So both of the Thunder Kittens decided to do something about it. So back with the Berserkers who just got their ship back, so it's now up to them to attack Termagor, Snarf, and the Goblin for taking their ship away, since back in part 4. So Rambam of the Berserkers did what their leader, Hammerhand, said and started shooting at the Goblin who took the ship away. So back with Termagor, the leader of the Tuskus, and Snarf on the Goblin, that's when after the Berserkers attack, the Goblin got hit in the behind. And now the goblin is going out of control, and that is indeed a big problem. Well, anyway, back with Termagor, he assures Snarf that the goblin's going to be fine, just singed a little. And then Snarf just heard the voices of Wily Kid and Wily Cat from below. Well, Snarf is relieved to see the Thunderkins had arrived just in time, so he told Termagor this suggestion to take very good care of the goblin. "But what about you, Snarf?" Termagor asked. "How will you get to Fire Rock Mountain?" "Don't worry," Snarf says. "Just drop me off anywhere at shore," he suggested. So now that Termagor, the leader of the Tuskus, head off, it's now up to the Berserkers to take care of the Thunderkins. Not if the Thunderkins can take care of them first, so that's what they did. So long story short, after that short-lived attack from the Berserkers, that's when Wily Kid pleads her case with her brother to say that there's no way they can match up the firepower from the Berserkers. Now Wily Cat, who agrees with sister, said no, that's true, but we can use all of our firepower at once. Quick, put all your pellets in your pouch. So that's what his sister did. And once the kittens did that, they threw both their pouches up to the Berserker ship. So after they did that, that's when the pouches exploded. And then after that, Ram Bam of the Berserkers went out of control. Well, long story short, now that Wily Kid has saw that her brother's in trouble, Cruncher of the Berserkers had squeezed Ram Bam. That gave her a chance to escape from the Berserker ship to join her brother. So meanwhile, back with the fist pounder, long story short, that had just set a trap since part 3, and here comes Panther in his Thunder Tank that has left Hook Mountain since part 3 also. He's now on his way to Fire Rock Mountain. So Panthro, speaking of which, realizes that there's a fist pounder up ahead waiting for him. Well, Panthro said to himself in his case, since there's nowhere else to go but to go ahead of, so that's what he did. Well, back with the fist pounder, it almost clobbered the thunder tank, but luckily it missed. Well, anyway, back with the fist pounder, by the time it goes back around, Monkey approached the thunder tank, but he finds it weird that the tank was empty. And he wanted to know, where did Panthro go? Well, he didn't have to look for very long because there's Panthro out of nowhere, and now he goes one on one with Monkey and other mutants. The first thing Panthro do was to eject Monkey out of the fist pounder. Then what Panthro did next was unbelievable. He made the fist pounder chase after Monkey and other mutants instead. When Monkey saw it, he couldn't believe it, and so he ran off with the fist pounder behind him. So long story short, now that the fist pounder won't be bothering Panthro anymore, back with the Berserker ship still attacking the Thundercats in the water. Well, just when Hammerhand, the leader of the Berserkers, long story short, had told his men to keep attacking, that's when he noticed that there's something coming their way. Remember the fist pounder that was from Fire Rock Mountain? Well, guess what? When Hammerhand, the leader of the Berserkers, saw what had happened, he panicked, and so were his men, and before they could evacuate, their ship sank to the bottom of the ocean thanks to the fist pounder that landed on it and along with the berserkers. Watching it happen were the Thunder Kittens. They were overjoyed to see that the berserkers won't be bothering them anymore, so they are now on their way to Fire Rock Mountain, just like what the others did. So meanwhile, back on Fire Rock Mountain, now that everyone has met up with Hachiman, well, except for Snarf, but he'll show up later. But then suddenly Mumm-ra appears out of nowhere. So, long story short, after the Thundercats and Hachiman turned around to look at Mumm-ra, who just appeared out of nowhere, well, Hachiman knows what to do. He decided to go into battle with Mumm-ra and told him to defend himself. But before Hachiman could do anything about it, that's when Mumm-ra pleads his case to tell him that he had betrayed him. So as his punishment, guess what Mumm-ra did? He made Hachiman disappear, and Lionel just saw it right before his eyes. Lionel was horrified. He just couldn't believe what he's seen. Hachiman gone. And now he's left to wonder, what has Mumm-ra done with him? Don't worry, Lionel, Jaga said when he appeared out of nowhere. Hachiman will be fine. As a matter of fact, he's safe. And here's some better news, Jaga says. He's back in his own time, in his own dimension. I'm glad to hear that, Lionel said, because now here comes the bad news. I'm afraid, Lionel said to Jaga, we have failed in our mission. So after Lionel had pleaded his case to say there's not much else they can do about it, but on the contrary, Jaga told him that there is something that can be done about it. So Jaga explains that the Star of Thundera may be the only solution. And of course, in Jaga's case, if he can get it, then Lionel can be protected. So Lionel wants to know how he's going to get it from there, he being Jaga. So Lionel told the spirit of his mentor that he must have it ASAP. Don't worry, Lionel says. I'll try to get it for you. And then after that, he disappeared. So Jaga's now on his way, but what neither the Thundercats didn't know is that someone else wants the Star of Thundera for himself, and that someone was Mumm-ra. But now, according to Mumm-ra, when he pleaded his case, here comes a problem. He said if the Thundercats should use it against him, that would be the end of him. Or, as Mumm-ra says in his case, he'll be done for sure. So, aha, just like what any bad guy would do, Mumm-ra has a plan to keep this mission from succeeding. And how? Well, Mumm-ra says in his case there's only one person that can handle the job, someone that Jaga had defeated once before, and that would be Groon, the Destroyer. Then Mumm-ra also says in his case that Groon the Destroyer would be just the person to do so. And of course, why not? What better way for Groon to handle a job such as this? So meanwhile, back with Jaga, he was on his way to the Star of Thundera, but before he can complete his mission, he sees someone standing his way, his own archenemy, Groon the Destroyer, and he just appeared out of nowhere. So by the time that Jaga arrived and then saw Groon on the scene, that's when he told Groon, Jaga that is, to move out of the way because he says in his case that he didn't have time for all of this. Then Groon has his turn to plead his case to say that's true, but there's always time for me to settle the score, the one that's long overdue, he said. And then Groon told Jaga this case, if you really want the Star of Thundera, you had to come through me first. Then Groon asked Jago a question. How about a fair fight? What's your decision? Then Groon, by surprise, just made his first attack, and he didn't hesitate to do so. And of course, Jago moved out of the way. And so, before you know it, the battle between Jaga and Groon just went on and on and on. That was until what Jaga saw was unbelievable. He was falling into the Black Planet, and Jaga just couldn't believe it. Now Groon, on the other hand, who was laughing with delight, not only told Jugga this case that he's indeed correct, but not just that though, he was pulled into some kind of gravitational force, if you will. And of course, according to what Groon says in his case, there's no way that Jugga's gonna escape from it. Things looked pretty bad for Jugga, until when Groon looked over his shoulder, a light from the Star of Thundera just blinded him, and for some unknown reason, it managed to rescue Jaga, and just in time, too. So now that Grun has been driven away, thanks to the power of the Star of Thundera that rescued Jaga, so Jaga only asks for one simple request to grant its power to protect all Thundercats on their Earth. But not just that, and to make sure that the Thundercats mission will succeed. Well, the Star of Thundera not only agrees to grant Jaga's permission, but even better. So what Jaga did is that by the use of his hands, the Star of Thundera now becomes a talisman. So back on Third Earth and at Fire Rock Mountain, when Jaga's spirit came back, Lina wanted to know if the Star of Thundera has given him the power that it needs. Well, Jaga says no, it was not given at all. Then Jaga says the power within the star itself is not a gift. But better than that, Jaga explains to Lionel that the power itself has its responsibility. So what Jaga did is that he puts the talisman around Lionel's neck and said, wear this talisman well. So before Jaga can leave, he leaves Lionel with one last device. This talisman would help a lot, and it'll protect him from all the Thundranium. So Jaga said, go now, save those countrymen. And so after that, Jaga disappeared. So before Lionel can head off, wishing him luck was Panthro. And so after that, Lionel heads off. So back with the Thundarians, they're trying to find a way out of there. But Bengali said that there's a problem. There's a bunch of Thundranium everywhere. Well, Link, so, although being supportive as he is, he told Bengali that even if that were the case, that's their only way out of there. And he said that's the only chance they can take to save themselves. Now, Pumira, who agrees with Linkso, told Bengali, you know what? In this case, Linkso was never wrong so far. And so, what Pumira is suggesting is that he should trust Linkso. And so, they decided to follow him. Well, that's going on. Sly, the leader of the mutants, and Jackalman had met up with Mumm-ra. But by surprise, when the mutants looked behind them, they saw that the Thundarians were about to get away. But wait, just when the mutants were about to do a favor for Mumm-ra to get rid of the Thundarians, here comes Lino, heading in their direction. So anyway, long story short, now that the Thundarians had took care of the mutants, well, literally, now Lionel can tell that he was really impressed and told the Thundarians it looks like that they handled it pretty well. And then when he ran up to them, he says, quickly, join your hands on mine. And so they did. So Lionel gave the Thundarians the support that they need by saying, as long as you're in contact with me, Thundarium can never harm you in any way. Overhearing this was Mumm-ra, who appeared out of nowhere, who saw what Lionel was doing to guide the Thundarians across the bridge. Also, on top of that, Mumm-ra saw that Lionel has a talisman around his neck and said, no, this can't be! Impossible! So just like what any good guy would do, he decides to transform to his monstrous form first. And he's going to do whatever is necessary to stop Lionel, or so he thought. So speaking of which, back with Lionel, good news, he guided the Thundarians across the bridge to meet up with the others. But the bad news is that Lionel didn't realize that someone took the talisman from him, and that someone was Mumm-ra. After Lionel saw what had happened back with Mumm-ra, he pleaded his case to say that he has done himself a favor and that he got the Star of Thundera in the palm of his hands, no doubt. He says, at last the power of that star is mine, all mine. And just when he was about to open the talisman, the spirit of Jaga appeared. He said, Mumm-ra, no! Stop! The talisman must not be opened. But Mumm-ra chose to ignore him anyway, and just when Jaga disappeared, that's when Mumm-ra decides to open the talisman. Just like what any bad guy would do. And when he did that, the entire Fire Rock Mountain, in the classic sense of a word, began to fall apart. So, long story short, after that job with the Star of Thundera is finished, that's when Jaga appeared to Lionel again. And that's when Lionel said that he couldn't see Mumm-ra anywhere and then wants to know, had the Star of Thundera finished him off? Well, to answer that question, that's when Jaga says it would seem likely so. He even said those who seek the power for themselves are likely to be destroyed themselves. But other than that, Jaga said, the power from the star from itself belongs to the universe alone. And so after that, he disappeared. So after Jaga disappeared, that's when Chitara asked Panthro a question. So is it over? Is the mission finished? Well, Panthro told her no because for two simple reasons. Because according to Panthro, in his case, he said, first of all, Ratoro must pay for what he did to the Thunder Tank since back in part 3. And second of all, he has some unfinished business with the Rastor as well. But then, guess who decided to come out of nowhere? It's Snarf. I told you we'd get back to him later. And that's when Snarf told Panther the good news that it won't be necessary because he said, thanks to the Tuskas, they took care of that already. So, in other words, in Snarf's case, he just told Panther that the Red Star won't be bothering him anymore. So we know what this means. It's time now to go back to Cat's Lair. But on the way, let's not forget Robert Bird and Robert Bob. Thanks to Snarf who rescued them back in part 4, it's time for them to get back to the Burble Village, where they belong on the way. So meanwhile, back at Cat's Lair, after dropping off the Burbles on the Burble Village on the way, that's when Lionel introduced the Thundarians to their new home, on Third Earth, of course. Now the Thundarians can tell that they were in awe, and that's when Palmyra went first to speak in her case to say, I can't thank you enough, especially Lionel. That's what Bengali goes next to speak in his case, that none of this would be possible if it wasn't for him. So after Linkso had pleaded his case to his Thundarian friends that what they're looking at is really Lionel, the leader of the Thundercats. So one Lionel wants to know from Linkso, how did he know about it? Well, Linkso just let something slip to Lionel that he once knew Claudius, who's Lionel's father. So Lionel says, wait, you knew Claudius? Well, Linkso not only says yes, but even better. He said, as every Thundercats know, Claudius is very well known. Well, Lionel, although being curious, wants to know more about Claudius' own father because he just made a confession to Linkso that he was only 12 when the planet exploded, as we saw back in part 1, and just like in season 1. Well, Linkso told Lionel that he was more than happy to, if he ever comes back to visit. What do you mean, visit? Lionel said. What are you talking about? You're all going to be living at Castlair, right here. You mean on Third Earth? Palmyra asked. Then Bengali pleased his case to say, well, back on Thundera before the planet exploded, that lair was for Thundercats only. Well, Mino, although he agrees with Bengali, that's when he says that you Thundarians had handled it quite well, even like the Thundercats that you are. So Lionel made a suggestion that once the Thundarians are anointed in some way, that's when they'll become the true Thundercats, and then asked his friends what they thought of it. So they all agreed. So later in the Cat Lairs console room, Lionel did exactly what he was planning to do, get all three of the Thundarians anointed. So that's what he did. First up is Linkso. Then up next is Palmyra. Then the last one up is Bengali. So, yep, you've heard right. All of the Thundercats are at last united. So, what started out as 7 now became 10. So, the big question is for the Thundercats, since it's a big, huge day, will they be seeing the last of Mumm-ra? And what would happen if they do? Well, we're about to find out. But right now, that's the end of part 5 and episode 5.